together. Okay, perfect. Will you introduce yourself? Start with Yusuf. You go.
Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me. I'm honoured to be an ally. My name's Asim Ishak. I'm in order, and I'm here because. Shall I say why I'm here?
Yeah, of course.
Because Qasim said to me, Asim, you've got to be here. No, seriously. I have three. I'm a father of four. I have three girls, a son and three girls, and I am passionate about them achieving the best they can in life, and therefore I'm passionate about doing the same for anybody else in the world. And that means anybody. You know, if you ever meet me and I can be of use to you, I will do my darndest to be of use to you. So, you know, I'm a fan of half the world. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, pleasure to be joining you this afternoon. So I'm Lee Chambers. Diverse background, built and scaled a tech company, been a stay-at-home dad, psychologist academically, now run an inclusive wellbeing company and an allyship social enterprise, and very much focused on how we build allyship as a skill set that really binds into leadership competencies, and how we really kind of increase our gender and cultural intelligence in our day-to-day work.
Thank you. Kevin?
I'm Kevin Yusuf Coleman. I'm head of DNA at BBC Studios. I think I'm here because maybe I've got an interesting background. I work in media at the BBC now, but previous to this, I spent 20 years working in sport, mainly in football. And inclusion, and especially gender equality, you couldn't get any more different ends of the spectrum. So I think hopefully I can give a bit of a contrast of how it plays out in different industries.
Well, thank you all for coming and being here. My first question for you, no pressure on the questions, a lot of women in the audience, but how can men actively challenge and dismantle the patriarchal norms that we have and stereotypes that perpetuate gender inequality and discrimination specifically against women? Whoever wants. All of you can answer.
In my career, I've worked for 4 corporates and I've been self-employed for 25 years. So I have hired about 200 interns for my companies, and I deliberately hire people who don't have any skills and experience in that space. If they have skills and experience in that space, I don't hire them. If I can't pronounce their name, they're going to get an interview. You know, if they come from a cultural background that is not mainstream, they're going to get an interview. I am aggressively interested in helping people those that may otherwise get ignored, and that's what I do. And I make them promise me that when it's their turn, when they are in a job and they've got experience and they've got skills and they've got a wonderful, you know, house and family, that a CV rolls across their desk, and it's of a person that should not belong in that job, other than because they're motivated, that they do the same and they hire, they interview. And if they can, they put themselves in that space again and they do their darnest to get that person in. So I think a meritocracy, I think most people have seen that diagram of people in a race, and a meritocracy, you think everybody's on the same line, but meritocracy is not. Meritocracy is understanding where people come from and where they are, where their start in life has taken them. Yeah. And a true meritocracy is putting everybody in their right space on the track, and it's not at the front, and it's not at the back. So for me, I'm keen on seeing where people have come from and seeing the effort they've gone to get to where they are. Yeah. So that's what a meritocracy is to me, and I'm going to do my darnest to live that meritocracy because it's worked for me.
Yeah. We'll give you a round of applause. Thank you. Lee?
So I suppose this is my everyday life quite often at the minute. I'm often looking at the lived reality of women in the workplace and then men's perception of that lived reality. The truth is, there's a massive gap. In fact, in relatively recent research, what we found is that 82% of women in the workplace feel they've been excluded at some point, but 91% of men don't think they're excluding women. So there's such a gap there in perception versus reality, and allyship as a concept is about closing that bridge. The word means to combine, to unite, and to come together, very much like the male-female alliance that we're sat here talking about today. So I suppose, how do we get men to start to lean into allyship? Well, it's actually really important, because if I think about my own journey, it actually started when I lost the ability to walk, and that challenged my masculinity, the things I valued: physicality, independence, autonomy. And then I became a stay-at-home dad, and I walked into the baby group with my daughter, and I was the only father in the room. And it's really powerful what happens when you're the only one of your gender in the room. But women so often face that in so many different industries. And actually, to face that gives you a very different perspective all of a sudden. And then listening, like truly listening to the stories of the mothers and grandmothers in that room. So for me, the allyship journey starts with a bit of work on yourself, listening, unlearning some of the gender stereotypes that you face as a man, that while they're put on you by society, can be quite unhelpful in being able to explore other people's experiences, getting curious and starting to actually explore the world, a perspective that you might not have had, experiences that you might not have been through. And then there's obviously starting to think about what you can do. And obviously, sometimes we look at allyship as being big, sweeping change and really big statements and campaigns. But actually, the real power of allyship is small, micro moments over time, noticing the things around you. And if there's one thing that I will say over the past 10 years on my journey, I didn't see a lot of things until I started to explore. Now I can't unsee gender inequity everywhere. It's quite unsettling, quite uncomfortable, but you need to be prepared for that discomfort to make systemic change.
Thank you.
I think my response would be a bit more practical. I think you need to understand what those norms and stereotypes are. You need to really analyse what the issue is. I think it's very situation specific. So say at the moment I'm at BBC, which is 65% female. I came from football, which was 99% male.
Yeah.
And the behaviours were completely different too. So you need to know where you are, and you need to be able to measure it to know whether you're moving. Just like you said, the perceptions of men as to whether it's an inclusive workplace will be very different to the perceptions of women, and also different women. You can't have a sweeping statement that all women think the same. Might be some women in leadership or in some divisions who have one experience, and then in other parts of the organisation. So you really need to listen in an empathetic way, create a safe environment where people can speak up, and also measure.
Yeah.
Look at whether your representation is representative at leadership level. Most organisations have most of their diversity at the lower level, and then the culture of the organisation really kicks in the higher you go up. BBC, our board is 50-50 or slightly more female, but I wouldn't say that we are an equitable organisation fully. So I think you really need to analyse and have a plan, because if you don't know where you're starting from, you don't know where you're going to.
Yeah. It's powerful for sure. How do you think then all of you men can recognize and address their privilege in society that they have or that of, and how does how does acknowledging that contribute to becoming an effective ally for women, recognizing that being here today, for example, someone will be like, oh, it's an International Women's Day conference, like kind of that's for women, but actually being a proper ally and recognizing that you are also important in that conversation. If anything, we need you to lead and take charge of that conversation. Everyone can answer that.
I was going to say this one, I think the fact that we're the only men in the room, or there's not many, I think is quite telling. I think, historically, inequality has come from men. So men have ruled the world, men have had all the power and all the money. So you can't expect women to redress that change, because a lot of that power still lies in the hands of men. So everyone needs to be on board with any movements in this area. And in terms of privilege, you need to recognise your own privilege. I think the word privilege is quite a triggering one. And I think if you know you're in a majority, it can be quite threatening. So I think we need to normalise and realise that everyone has privilege. You walk into one room, you'll be the privileged. You walk into another situation, you'll be underprivileged. And I see privilege almost as like this sort of lasagna with many, many levels. And depending on the situation, you're higher or lower. And once people get their head around that concept, it's much easier to talk about and address and understand and put things in place. Because I think at the moment, when you talk about privilege, the shutters will often come down, whether you're talking to a man or someone who's white or someone who's straight, depending on the situation. So we need to really normalise what privilege is before we can start to make progress.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And I suppose in our work, we really focus on privilege not being what you have, but what you don't have, what you don't have to face, the thoughts that you don't have to think, the preparation you don't have to do because you're in a place of privilege. What we also do is, like Kevin says, privilege has become quite a lauded term. We actually, instead of looking directly at privilege, we reframe it to relative advantage. Because quite often, especially when engaging men, it helps them to see when they can understand the relative advantage, and you can give scenarios that quite often link to sport or something that men can relate to. I think sometimes in this space, what I'm really passionate about is that if I think about some of the things that I've been able to do in my career, some of the changes in gender equity over the past 50 years, things such as being able to be a stay-at-home father, having the opportunity to work flexibly, that has come from the movement and the power of becoming a bit more gender equitable. There's still an awful long way to go. The reality is that 99.9% of that heavy lifting to make change in society has been done by women. Men are benefiting from that. Men haven't done any of the heavy lifting. And that's why, from an allyship perspective, it's about time we picked up some of these systems and started doing some work, because we're benefiting from it, but we've not put any effort in. That's what drives my work. But to kind of come back to the point, intersectionality and getting men to understand that, because so often, I speak to black men and they say, look, I face so much racism. Why should I be an ally to other people? I'm constantly discriminated against. Men from lower socioeconomic backgrounds saying, do you know how hard I've worked to get to where I am? And then people are saying you're privileged just because of what I look like. For so much of this work that I do around engaging men is actually meeting men where they're at, understanding that men are at so many different points in that journey, but finding ways to engage them and get them to see what's in it for them. Because there's an awful lot in it for men to become allies, effective allies, collaborate with women and make beneficial change, not just for the world, but for themselves as well.
Awesome.
So, as a Muslim, will you join me in some wine?
Yeah.
So I'm going to have a whining session now for a moment. That's the only wine I'm going to get.
That's fine.
Yeah, thank you.
We love the wine.
So I am really freaking disappointed that there are so few men here. It's disgusting that there are so few men here. It's so appalling that you wonderful people could not persuade a man to come with you. It's appalling that men don't see the value in supporting half the fucking planet. It's ridiculous. It bothers me that men think they're going to drift through in life, on their own and not benefit from the other half of the planet being as successful as they could be. If you're a greedy man, and I'm not a greedy man, if you're a greedy man, isn't it better to get half the rest of your company, or maybe 30% of the company in most companies, working as hard as they could be, being the best they could be, driving profit? Isn't it wonderful to have a happy life where the rest of your household, if that is your household, or the rest of your family members are as successful as they could be? It bothers me that men don't get it. It bothers me that men think the only way to get on in life is to support the other blokes in their community, and be in the clubs with more men. I find it confusing. I was always brought up with aunties as more influential with me in my early life than my uncles. But it bothers me that men don't see the point of supporting their sisters, their aunts, their mothers and their cousins. And if you just do that, if you just do nothing else but support your sisters, your aunts and your cousins, this world would be a better place. And yet and some of us thrive on holding people back. That could be a sister of a friend, it could be the cousin of a friend. It bothers me that they do that, and I don't do that because I'm actually very, very greedy. I want wealth for everybody. I want dignity for the world. I know it's a big ask, but you see the devastation around the world. If there were more women in the room when these negotiations would happen to solve some of these things, I wonder how it would be. I wonder how much testosterone in the room is causing some of these crazy freaks to be so belligerent around their desire to take over somebody. That's not how you get on the world, is it? I mean, it's not. So what I do in my work is I see women, I see colour, I see sex, but I'm interested in energy and passion and motivation. That's what I'm looking at. And if there's energy, passion, and motivation, then I'm supporting it, whatever the colour, whatever the shape, the form, the orientation. Because that if you want a better life for yourself, when you're old and you can no longer do anything, you want to be able to look back in your past and think, I've done something, I've made a difference in people's lives. And you can only do that if you've actually made a difference in loads of people's lives, and you haven't decided you're only going to make a difference in men's lives. The thing about men is, if you see a nail, we want to bang it. We want to bang it down, and I think men have to see a nail and think, what? Is it the best thing to bang it down, or should I do something else? Maybe I need to polish that nail. We were so reactionary. We were so reactionary, and we just need to be a bit more wise. So I think what you need to do as women is talk about this with your brothers, your cousins, your uncles, and be the advocate for men being your advocates, and talk to them about these crazy men. One's wearing a black suit, one's wearing a white jacket, one's wearing a colourful tie. Talk about these crazy men you saw, how they want to do good for women as well, and I wonder, is that something you would support as well? Bring them along on your journey, because they just need help. Give them a nail, and that nail is, I need your support, and I hope that they bang it.
Can I be honest? Most women have tried that, but they don't get listened to. They don't get respected. We actually need, as men, to be the ones who bring other men on the journey.
I agree with you, but I think this movement is of its time now. And you can no longer, as a man, you can no longer say, I don't care. I don't give two hoots. I'm not bothered. You can't say that now.
But we're in a society where our research showed this year, 41% of men think inclusion and diversity has gone too far. It's reducing their opportunities of promotion. Yeah. It's stopping them being able to, achieve. We live in a really individualistic society, don't we?
And there was a lady here who said, it's got to get personal.
Yeah.
And it's really got to get personal. You have to make it personal. For me, it's personal. I've got 3 daughters that, one wants to be work in a medical environment in laboratories. One wants to be a lawyer. One wants to be an astronaut. And I tell you what, I am going to give my life to making sure they get there. And for my nieces and for my cousins, I've done everything I can. I got one into an MSc and got into a PhD. I've opened doors for them to get internships. And that's what I'm going to do, because they said, uncle, dad, cousin, can you help? And you've got to make it personal. You've got to say, dad, uncle, cousin, brother, I need your help.
But with like what Lee said, then how do you have that conversation with men? If I always use the analogy, if you look like a pie, right? So back in one day, straight white males, they had all of the pie, but diversity and inclusion, when you start giving to people that are a bit more women get more opportunities. Men see that as them getting less opportunities, and they're very hold on a minute, I'm now the one that's suffering from this. Like what Lee said, how do you have the conversations with men that are not receptive and not on board of it because they don't think that it's fair, or they think it's positive discrimination, or they think all of these things? How are you? I'm interested to see when you're having conversations with those type of men. I'm assuming you come across a lot of them in in your careers, and they think just because you're another men that they agree with them, and then you're actually like, no, I actually support women. Like, how do you have those conversations?
I think you need to. I think some of the data that's thrown around can be deliberately created to create a narrative. So I think you need to be very insightful. So you need to look at not just the diversity of your organisation, but you need to survey people, men and women, about how they actually feel. Create an environment where they're honest and listen more. I think the definition of an equitable organisation is not just the men's definition, and it's not just having 50-50 people in the room. It's that everyone feels like they're part of that organisation. There's loads and loads of research that says organisations that are diverse, inclusive and equitable do much better. They perform better. It's the right thing to do. I think one of the key takeaways, I would say, from this event and watching events like this and being events like this over the years is that often people talk a lot and there's a lot of energy, but there isn't so much following it up. There aren't actions in place. There isn't the evidence. People aren't made accountable. We need to have more than International Women's Day. It's part of the solution, because it raises awareness, it creates energy, people can network. But when everyone leaves this room, you've got to have a plan, and you've got to have data, and you've got to listen to people to know what those data points are. I think a lot of the boring stuff is what really makes the change. Have you looked at the policies in your organisation? Are they equitable? Have you listened to the women and the men to understand what they're... I think a lot of the issues men have are down to ignorance. We have a women's network, a gender inclusion network. There are very, very few men, I'd say, in that network. You need a lot more men. If you have a lot more men, a lot of the decision makers, a lot of the insight they have will be more useful and will make more of a difference, and you'll make change much, much quicker.
Yeah, I think sometimes men are coming at it from different points. They've got different drivers. The business case sometimes needs to be to get certain men on board who see that fundamentally this idea of becoming more equitable will mean less pie, but actually showing them from a business case perspective how by being more collaborative in nature, bringing different and diverse ideas to the table and building high-performing diverse teams will actually mean we bake more pie, which means everyone gets more pie. Because no human being wants to do something where they feel they'll fundamentally lose out. And we've got to approach it from a place like that where, the men who are more resistant are feeling like they will, lose something. Truth be told, the data shows that they aren't really, at this present moment, losing very much because of the slow progress quite often in different organisations around moving towards gender equity, especially in more senior roles. But we also need to understand and listen to men too in this conversation, because we've all got blind spots. Being able to shine a light on those blind spots closes the gap. And understandably, there is some resistance. And actually, DEI is under attack quite a bit in the US. And an ability to actually quantify the impact that it's having gives you a much stronger case when you do come under attack, because that will start to happen here. But I think, when it comes to engaging men, it's really important you try and meet men where they're at. Try and really... Inclusion's not done the best job overall of really showcasing what's in it for men, so that they can clearly see reasons how developing allyship skills will really link into leadership competencies of the future, understanding that the next generation, they won't be led how the previous generation's been led. They have different expectations. And those skills you build from being inclusive are what that next generation expects. So it's really important we kind of anchor into what's in it for men.
The word inclusion, is about including everyone. And that's all areas of diversity. You need to educate men in a collaborative way. So a shout out to a book, Rebel Ideas by Matthew Said. That gives concrete examples of where businesses have used diversity to be really successful and to make more money and to do the right thing. Fantastic examples of things you all would have heard of. That is the way, I think, to bring people with you, because inclusion is about everyone. The narrative in the media that suits a lot of media outlets is that it's divisive and it's woke. But if you educate people about what it's really about, and it's very simple, it's just about good business. It's about being good people, doing the right thing, and good business creates success.
I like that.
I think you said a really interesting, and so did you actually. I was listening intently. I think the Neanderthal man needs clarity and simplicity. And I think, if you can meet them in the journey that they're going on, if I give the analogy of having a conversation, wanted to have a conversation with somebody, and you think of it as like cars on the road, and you just stand in front of the car to stop the car and try and get the conversation, you're going to get knocked over. But if you know where the direction of that car is going, and you say, you know what, I'm going in that direction as well. This is what I feel as well. Can I join you? I think you probably get people to say, yeah, come on board. But I don't think men need to behave that way. And you know what? If you're not getting resistance, then you're not pushing hard enough. You're not trying hard enough. You're not wanting enough. So I think women need to be ambitious. Yeah, you need to be ridiculously ambitious for the world. You need to be ambitious for yourself, and what you're trying to achieve. And that means you're going to get a bit of pushback. As a neurodiverse Asian bloke from a very humble background, I get pushback all the time. And if I don't get a bit of pushback, I'm not trying hard enough, and that pushes me to work harder. Life is not easy, and it deserves to be fair. And I'm just speaking from the reality of the world I live in, rather than. No, I'm saying keep being ambitious. I'm saying
I was going to ask that. Thank you for asking.
No, I'm saying keep being ambitious and want more. Whatever your level of ambition is, multiply it by 10.
Okay,
I think Lee disagrees. Let's agree. You disagree with him. Let's hear your opinion.
There is a little aspect of gender communication where the more ambitious a woman is, the more aggressive, pushy, bolshy, bossy she's perceived, which is a real challenge.
Yeah.
And whose problem is that?
Well, it's
the bloke's problem, right? Is it the man's problem that you're ambitious? I don't think it is. Yeah, and you're not wrong to be ambitious. You're not wrong to be ambitious.
Yeah.
Yes, and you know what? You should turn that around and say, I want even more than that. Yeah, good for you.
This is why we're sat here, because we have more power and privilege to change the structures that create the inequity in the first place. And, we can be part of that solution. That's why an alliance is so important. But it does sometimes require... Basically, men are going to make a lot of mistakes trying to understand this, because we don't have the lived experience of women. But if we're courageous enough to step in, listen, unlearn some of our own conditioning, and be able to actually start to think, what is the impact of the words that I use? What is the impact of not actively being part of this? The truth is, women have more opportunities than they did 50 years ago, but the systems haven't changed at the same speed.
They haven't. And is the average bloke capable of thinking in that sensible way?
They should be.
They should be. Yeah.
As I say,
You go. I'm intrigued. You're head of
one
diversity.
really simple point. The more conversations we have about this, I believe that most people are inherently good. Most people have inherently good intentions. The more conversations, because all men are not the same. We all come at it from a different life experience. We have different levels of knowledge.
You like that one?
And not all women are the same.
Yeah.
So I think the more conversations we have is very nuanced, and it comes down at an individual level. Every individual can approach this and make their contribution. The more conversations we have between us, we will work it out at an individual level, and over time that will create momentum. So I think events like today are brilliant, but everyone needs to go away and have more conversations. That will gradually seep into the cultures of whether it be your families, your friends, your workplaces, and over time that will change things.
Yeah,
the cultural change will naturally push the policies and the procedures. There'll be more research. Things have a knock-on impact, but we can all start with just having more conversations.
For sure.
Everyone will get that.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like like what we've discussed on topics, when you give women advice or tell them what to do, you think chances are they've already done it, they've tried and they've exhausted every opportunity and every possibility, and often do come across that they feel like they aren't good enough in certain situations and they aren't listened to. So things like this are really, really useful, and it's very intriguing to hear your perspectives, and thank you for coming on today. We have run out of time for this session, so I guess give it up to our panel, and thank you to the audience. Thank you.